Your husband, Jan, and you work very closely together. He's your coach, your business partners, you're driving the sport internationally through
Yeah.
development of competitions. Life doesn't stop for you outside of the competition arena, does it?
Yeah, no. Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of, I train quite a few girls, and which I love doing, and it's quite rewarding, and keeps me also on my game and what I'm doing, and reminding myself of things I have to think about, so I love to do that. I really enjoy doing that, and I also love to be involved in, some of my horses I build, and they're horses to sell, some of them I have together with owners. It just depends a little bit. But it's nice to see when you've found a horse for somebody, and, and it goes really well. And sometimes it doesn't always go like that, but, it's part of the business, and looking always for good horses, and finding the right horse for the right people, and, and just managing the stable and being involved and on top of everything.
What's your assessment from what you get to see back in Australia of the riders coming through the show jumping ranks at the moment? What are the standards like compared to when you started at that level here in Australia?
Yeah. Well, when I started, I wasn't very good, so they're probably doing a lot better than I was, to be honest. So there is a lot of hope there, let's just put it that way. Yeah, I mean, I don't get to watch a lot of the shows, obviously, because first the time difference, and there's not many of the shows have live streams, so it's quite hard for me to know, honestly, the level of what's going on. It is quite obvious for me to know when the riders come to Europe, and then I can see more how the level is with the riders from Australia. But yeah, I mean, I know some of the, they're really trying to make an effort to lift the shows here, the quality of the shows, and to get better quality shows, and try to lift a little bit the level of the riders. And I think the hardest thing is, when you you haven't got a lot of riders at a good enough level, it's quite hard to go out and build, a very big track and have a good competition, or a competition for one or two riders, so it's quite hard to accommodate for everybody. But on the other hand, it's maybe one way of trying to get the riders a little bit more up there. But the thing is, if you're always competing a little bit against the same level, it's quite hard to push yourself, I don't know if some of these top athletes, if they were, based in their own country, I don't believe a lot of them, would have maybe excelled to that highest level if they haven't competed against other top sports people, and I think that's the only way to compare your level, and to build your, and to work on your goals, and to know a little bit where you're at. And I know, because I had that when I first came to Europe, I didn't realize how far down I was, at that time. And I thought, I knew I wasn't, up the top for sure. I had a long way to go, but I also didn't realize I had that far to go. And I didn't, I when I arrived, I was very surprised and really thought, wow, I have to start from scratch, or not, and my goal was originally, just to come for 6 months, and then it was time, okay, is this really what I want to do, and do I really have it in me? And, it's always hard to know what talent you've got, but, in our sport, a big majority of our sport is the horse, and they are the athlete, and maybe a lot of people don't, agree with me with that, but it's definitely, I know for sure that's the situation, and everybody needs a good horse. So, and I think now, Australia's buying more and more horses from Europe, and they're getting to ride better quality horses, more horses that are similar, European style horses. And I mean, I know when I was here and riding all these thoroughbreds, they're not really the best for your riding, and you do learn some good habits, but you also learn a lot of bad habits, and bad habits are very hard to get rid of, and you know, I was always extremely competitive, but I never really knew much how to ride with the seat and the leg because, you know, the thoroughbreds don't allow you to ride them like that. So, of course, you know, there's a lot of feel involved in riding a thoroughbred, and I definitely believe that if you do know how to ride a thoroughbred very well, then, you know, there are a lot of other horses that you will come across if you know, in Europe that are based a lot on the feel, you know, and rather than pressure and, you know, a different style of riding. But so yeah, I mean, I just I think that you know, at the end of the day, there's nothing that beats experience, and there's nothing that beats, you know, knowing where you are and how to work, you know, forward, and how to push yourself and how to get to that level that you want to be. And I really believe that, you know, everything is possible in life, and I think that, you know, you've got to you know, set standards, realistic goals, and you know, try to reach those goals. And, you know, like I said, it was for me a real wake-up call when I went over there, and I never imagined I would get to where I am when I was there. And of course I was really fortunate because I managed to find a lot of good horses. But in the beginning I was, you know, I was riding, you know, 10 to 12 horses every day. I was some weeks I was on 2 shows every week, and all different kind of shows, like with young horses and 2-star shows, 3-star shows. I didn't do my first 5-star show until I was I think that was in 2000. Yeah. So and I was a little bit late starter because I had a lot of bad horses in Australia, and you know, I come from a family that's non-horsey background family, so we didn't really know what we were getting ourselves into. And it wasn't really until I turned 18 and then George sort of saw what I was trying to ride, which wasn't getting me anywhere, and I wanted to stop. You know, I really wanted to give up because I kind of knew with what I had was not going to get me far, and I didn't want to waste my parents' time and money. And yeah, and I remember telling George, you know, I think, you know, you need to do me a favor and tell my parents that I should just, you know, call it quits, because I just felt really bad. And you know, and I just sort of knew with these horses I wasn't going to get far. I figured that one out. And you know, I remember I was watching a video not so long ago, having a lesson with George, and I think I fell off 3 or 4 times in the one lesson, you know, so I just kept getting back on and getting back on, and, you know, and so I went through a really tough time, and I'd won a lot before that, like when I was in Pony Club, and then I went through this horrible phase of wanting to stop and horrific horses, and then I got some decent horses, and then I sort of tried to win every single class I did, and which was good on one side, but there was not much management on the other side, you know, so there was a massive learning process there for myself, and just to put things a little bit into perspective. But yeah, I mean, you know, this was the starting point living in Australia, and it was a lot of interesting memories. And but like when I see myself when I was here, and when I see, you know, I hadn't had a lot of experience, and I'd jumped, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 World Cups, and like I was a bit late, you know, I probably jumped my first World Cup when I was maybe 20, you know, so I was quite a late starter. And then, yeah, I think if people probably see where I started and how I started and where I came from and how I've built myself in over the time in the last 20 years, that's why I really believe it is possible, you know, but I really also believe it's really only possible to really do the sport at some point. You know, you do have to make that change and that sacrifice and try to be involved in living at some point in Europe, you know, and that's the way I think and believe, yeah.
At that moment when you were feeling like you were going to give up, what was the mental turning point for you to decide not to?
Well, because George told me, he said, I just know deep down that this is not what you want, and, you know, you have to do, you can't do things for other people, you know, you have to do this, you know, of course it was, you know, trying to think of my parents and what, you know, I was sort of going through, and, you know, and I never actually in my life got frightened until, except for there was one point where I got very frightened on this one particular horse, and I was hyperventilating afterwards. And then I think my mum really saw, this is just not healthy, and it's just not, she's not learning from this, and she's not gaining from this. And it's probably the only time actually in my life that I was ever afraid, and I guess that's because I probably realized, not that I'd had any other good horses to compare to, but I'd realized that this horse, he used to try to attack me when I'd get on it, and he would do everything to not want to go through the start or to stand in the corner or to stop at the jump. It was just an absolute nightmare, yeah. And of course it's funny looking back, and I can't believe that I had this horse, and I kept going with it and going with it, I did have another time actually when I was in Europe that I wanted to stop, and that was just actually when I met Jan in the beginning, yeah. So because after I was at Ludo's place for a couple of years, I went on my own for a few years and started up my own company, and I had no friends, no family, didn't really know, never started up a company in my life, so I really threw myself in the deep end, and I had a lot of good experiences, but had a lot of bad experiences, buying and selling horses and riding for other people, and I had my own stable that I was running, and it was an amazing part, and probably one of the best parts, I would say, of my career, where I really, really, really learned to get on my feet. I really learned to be strong. I really, it was the hardest way, but it was the best way for me to learn. And then I'd met Jan after a couple of years of being on my own, and I brought some clients to him, and actually George was over, and he had some clients that we went there to see some horses, and then things evaluated with Jan, and I'd sold a bunch of my horses, and then when I was with Jan in the beginning, he was riding a lot, and I was just involved in getting involved in his business. So I was for a couple of years very disappointed with some of what had happened to me with some business deals, and it was tough, very tough, and a little bit being alone, being taken advantage of, not having enough experience, and so it was a hard road, but and I was a little bit fed up then, and realized, and I really did realize at the end, to do this sport, and you have to choose, or you do the sport or you do the business, and it's, you have to just, and I had chosen to do the business, and then it wasn't really up until a couple of years later I started riding a bit more, and then I had the opportunity to invest in Pialotta, and which I never really knew if I could ride that horse, and she was a horse that had many, many, many good results with a lot of other riders, and not an easy horse, but and that's really when my career picked off, and I sort of put everything I had into that horse, and that I'd built up over the years, and I thought, this is it, this is my chance. I have an amazing opportunity to invest everything I've built my life for, and it could go one way or the other, but you never know until you try, and I was so used to throwing myself into the deep end that I thought it was a really good chance, good way to give me a chance. And it was really my decision where I would say, okay, my life in the sport is either going to be now or never. And then I won my first 5-star Grand Prix with her, and I was fourth in the WEG, and I had a lot of good results. So then things started to go like that, and
So then your advice to young riders is no doubt to never give up.
Yeah, and believe in yourself, and I think, you've just got to be really, really determined and really patient, and really open, and I think, you've got to understand that sometimes the bad experiences are good experiences, and try to learn from everybody, and not be closed and ignorant and arrogant, and I still love to learn every day. Sitting over there while Roger's giving a lesson, it's interesting. You might pick up on something, and and I think if you don't have that in you, and you're not open-minded, then I think for any sports person or business person, it's very hard to have success.